Welcome to Module 1 of the HHSRS2 online training. In this lesson, we cover the foundations, what the Housing Health and Safety Rating System is, where it came from, how it is structured, and what it does in practice. If you are new to the HHSRS, this module gives you the conceptual framework you need before the technical detail. If you have used the system for years, there are still things worth revisiting, particularly the changes in HHSRS2 and the terminology that often gets used loosely in practice. Let's start with the most basic question. The HHSRS, the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, is the statutory tool used by local housing authorities in England to assess the health and safety risks arising from conditions in residential properties. Be precise about the legal basis. Part 1 of the Housing Act 2004 provides the framework, the duties and the powers, while the assessment method itself is prescribed by regulations, the 2005 regulations, as amended by the 2026 Amendment Regulations. The system came into force in April 2006. A quick note on terminology. Throughout this course, we use the shorthand HHSRS2 for the reformed system. It is course shorthand, not a statutory term. The statutory name remains the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. The system is being updated, not replaced. It is the regulations, Statutory Instrument 2026 number 571, that carry the confirmed commencement date of the 23rd of June 2026. The revised operating guidance is, at the time of writing, still in draft until that procedure completes. So when you hear HHSRS2, think of it as the updated HHSRS. Before 2006, the framework was the Housing Fitness Standard, a pass or fail test. Is this property fit for habitation, yes or no? The HHSRS replaced that with something more nuanced. Instead of asking whether a property meets a threshold, the HHSRS asks, what is the risk of harm for each hazard to the vulnerable age group for that hazard, or to all persons where no age group is more vulnerable? It is a risk assessment, not a standard. We return to why that distinction matters in Lesson 3 and to the vulnerable age group in Lesson 4. The HHSRS was not invented by a committee working in isolation. It was developed from a substantial evidence base, a literature review of the links between housing and health, statistical analysis of national datasets, and case studies. That approach allowed the system to connect specific housing conditions to specific health outcomes with statistical evidence rather than assertion. The kinds of national data drawn on included housing condition surveys, mortality and hospital episode statistics, fire service and safety records, and home accident data. Linking these allowed researchers to estimate, for the population, how likely particular harms are in particular types of housing. Here is the key point about the evidence base. The national average likelihoods and harm spreads in the system are evidence-based reference points drawn from population data, not invented. But scoring a specific property is not a purely mechanical lookup. It relies on the trained professional judgment of the assessor, comparing the property against those national averages. So the evidence anchors the judgment. It does not replace it. A full scored assessment should only be carried out by someone trained in the HHSRS assessment process. One note before we move on. The evidence just described is the foundation of the original HHSRS, published in 2006. The HHSRS2 reforms do not rest on a wholly separate evidence base. They draw on a government-commissioned independent review, stakeholder engagement, updated data, and revised resources, building on the original system rather than replacing its foundations. The review concluded in 2022, and we look at it in detail in Module 2. The underlying principle of the HHSRS is clear and simple. Any residential premises should provide a safe and healthy environment for any potential occupant or visitor. Note the word any potential occupant. The assessment is not about the current occupant, it is about the vulnerable age group that might occupy or visit the dwelling for each hazard or all persons where no group is more vulnerable. We come back to this in Lesson 4. In practice, the HHSRS runs end-to-end like this. You inspect the dwelling and identify the deficiencies. You select the hazards that merit assessment because not every one of the 21 hazards is scored in every property. You judge the likelihood and the spread of harm. The score gives the band and the category, and you decide the action. 2 things to hold from the start. Not all 21 hazards must be scored, and the band and category establish whether there is a duty or a power. Selecting the specific enforcement action is a separate decision, covered later. A word on the inspection. The HHSRS uses a whole dwelling assessment, but that does not mean every common part, regardless of relevance. You assess the dwelling together with the relevant shared and building-wide parts, the access routes and grounds, and the structural and common elements that serve it, where those are within the owner's or manager's responsibility and relevant to the hazards being assessed. The test is relevance to the risk, not completeness for its own sake. We will build on this framework through the rest of Module 1, the 21 hazards and the 4 groups in Lesson 2, the risk-based nature of the system in Lesson 3, and the vulnerable age group in Lesson 4. The full scoring method comes later, in Modules 6 and 7. For now, hold this end-to-end framework in mind.